Welcome everyone to There's Still Time for Hacktoberfest 2021 and celebrating open source all year. I will now pass on to Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm gonna share I have to get the slide deck going. Hold on. I'm gonna share the slide deck and talk you through some things related to Hacktoberfest. There we go. Yeah, so if you're just tuning into Hacktoberfest, Hacktoberfest is a celebration of open source software. It occurs every year in October. I believe we're in the 8th year of Hacktoberfest. And well, it's not me, it's a community related event. I really enjoy it and I've been participating in it for a number of years. And I think it's a really nice celebration to invite more folks into open source software. To give you a little bit of context where I'm coming from, my name is Lisa Tagliaferri. I did a PhD in the humanities. I did a few postdocs at MIT and Harvard working with digital humanities, where I built open source Python software. I wrote a few books about Python, so I'm a big Python fan, and I'm happy to be with you all today. I'm currently a director of developer education at SourceGraph, and I'm building an open source Learn platform that is participating in Hacktoberfest and welcoming open source contributors. So I want to give a little bit of background about open source software. Open source repositories have grown a lot, and while we can't necessarily give you all of the data about open source since it's a distributed space, this graph from GitHub gives us an idea. So open source repositories have grown like a crazy amount between 2008 and 2013. So this is all the software that's been available on GitHub from about 2008 through 2013, and we see this huge spike. Also today, if you attended, it was GitHub Universe today, so there's lots of new things coming out from GitHub too. I think it's usually helpful to have a kind of a definition of open source. This is Lynn Muldrow's definition. Open source software is software that's freely available to use, redistribute, and modify. It's typically shared via public code repository hosting service. So that's like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. Projects that are open source encourage a transparent process that is advanced through distributed peer review. Open source projects can be updated quickly and as needed, and offer reliable and flexible software that is not built on locked proprietary systems. So something to keep in mind here is there's also this concept of free and open source software. Free usually refers to more freedom versus what to pay, like that you're paying or not paying for it. It's worth noting that open source software does not necessarily mean that it's $0 or whatever currency. There's quite a few open source licenses that all have different kinds of protections and different kinds of distribution licenses, and those you could read more about from opensource.org, which is the open source initiative website. So open source software, I think, is so important because it lays the foundations and provides libraries for a lot of other software. Open source software is used in productivity apps, is used in entertainment apps like Netflix, social media apps like TikTok. It's software that's used in automobiles, and it also goes out into space. And even especially Python core contributors were used on the Mars rover, I believe. So it's really important. It underlies a lot of other software. It allows us to continue to incrementally build on top of other software. So just like knowledge, like when we have this long history of scientific knowledge, for example, and we're able to like pull from it so we don't have to start from scratch. I think of open source software as being like a space for that, where we could continue to build without reinventing the wheel, as it were. So I gave you a chart of how much GitHub open source repositories grew between 2008 and 2013. So if you thought that was a lot, as of January 2020, GitHub reports having over 40 million users and more than 190 million repositories, and at least 28 million of those are public or open source. So it continues to grow. And even if you're not an open source contributor, being familiar with Git is always useful. And that's what we're going to go over in a demo today. So I mentioned earlier that I'm a director of developer education at SourceGraph, and the way we've been participating in Hacktoberfest this year is through this Good First Issues board. And I'll put the link in the chat at the end after we do the whole demo. So we have this Good First Issues board where people can find issues that would be good for newcomers to open source. A lot of them are front end issues. A few of them are technical writing issues, which are from my Learn platform site. So we have them all put together here, and we have a FAQ on the left-hand side, and we also have a few READMEs that are related to this to help you get going if you're interested in contributing to SourceGraph in particular. And I will show you what we've been seeing in this is the SourceGraph Learn site. I'll show you the main page. So we have a number of educational tutorials and videos to help people learn about open source software. And the way we participated in Hacktoberfest is through these troubleshooting guides. And you see we have about 20 that have been merged in already. So it's really nice to see the community writing these guides to help people who are facing error messages while they're coding. And I'll show you what it looks like here. So we have a number of issues, and they're labeled as good first issues. I just added a bunch of Python that I was saving for today because the Python ones have been very popular. But we have quite a few pull requests that are all tied to the issues. We'll go through a code review, like a QA review of your the code samples, and go through the writing that you've done to help people. And I think people have been having good experiences so far. So that's definitely a place where you could contribute, and we would welcome contributions. This is kind of just like the highlights of what we've been seeing. So on the SourceGraph Learn site, we've seen 70 active pull requests over the past month, a little older than just October. My cat has come to say hello. And 62 pull requests have been merged by 21 different contributors. SourceGraph has also seen an increase during the month of October with the participation in Hacktoberfest. So if you're a maintainer of open source software, I think that there's lots of good ways to get involved. SourceGraph uses the Hacktoberfest accepted label for merged pull requests, so they're not super actively advertising it, but there's still a lot of activity and a lot of good code coming through. We're going to be talking about this Cloud Haiku repository, which is what I like to use for education. This is where we bring together haikus. I originally wanted them to be about cloud infrastructure, but it's a little more expansive than just cloud infrastructure today. And this is the repository. It's do-community cloud haiku, and I'll put it in the chat. And this is what one of the haikus looks like on the site. It's a Jekyll site. It's with Markdown. And this is what I'm going to walk you through. So if you want to follow along right now, what you would need is a GitHub account to be logged into, and we're going to be using GitHub Desktop to demo. We're going to post this video after the fact, and I also can point you through to a few different tutorials and videos that could help you get through this as well. So if you can't do it right now, that's okay. And at the end, we'll go through troubleshooting if anybody's having any issues. Yeah, so GitHub Desktop, if you go to GitHub, I guess you search for GitHub Desktop or go to, I don't know what their website is actually. Desktop.github.com, and then you'll be able to download it. It should initialize for the OS you're using, and then you could download that. And then we're going to walk through this. So I'm going to stop this and share my big screen. And I was going to see, is there anything top of mind in the chat or Q&A? Okay. Okay, so I have, this is what GitHub Desktop looks like. I am in the Cloud Haiku. If you need to add a haiku, or if you need to add the Cloud Haiku repository, what you would do is you would go to a clone repository, or you could go immediately to the browser and you could do the clone here. So it's Dio, I'll put it in the chat, sorry. To everyone. So if we go to github.com/do-community/cloud_haiku, we go to the code green button, and then we would do open with GitHub Desktop. And you could choose your application and open the link. I already had it here, but that would be one way to add it. You could also add it manually with this add button. Is everybody good? Okay. So right now we're on this main branch. So right now there's only one branch. That's the main branch of this repository. Each of these pull requests though would represent different branches, and what branches do is enable you to kind of get a snapshot of the repo as it is, and then you could make a change to that specific branch so that you're not making a change to the whole thing at once. And that's how we could work with version control. So what we're going to do now is create a new branch, which you could do in the desktop right here. So there's current branch main. We'll create a new branch. We'll call it, I'll call it my GitHub username with Women Who Code Python and today's date. You could call it whatever is meaningful to you. And what I'm going to do now is go to where I have this repository saved locally. So with GitHub Desktop, what happens is it shows up in your documents. So there should be a directory called GitHub. These are all my different repositories on GitHub, but I'm going to find this Cloud Haiku repository, and then we're going to go into the haikus directory, which is where all those markdown files are. So just again, this is the path that it is. It's documents, GitHub, Cloud Haiku, haikus. If you set up your GitHub Desktop a different way, it might be a little different, but generally speaking, if you find your Cloud Haiku repository, then you go into your _haikus directory, and then here would be all of the files that are the haiku files. So I'm going to use VS Code to do this, and I'm just going to copy an existing haiku and make a new one. If you need help with that, we have everything in the README. So we'll save this as October 27th haiku. So what we have here, this is the Jekyll Markdown format. So there's 3 hyphens on the top and the bottom of our header, which is not going to show up specifically in the text. It uses the haiku layout so that you don't change. We'll change the title to be whatever you want it to be. Probably you want to choose something more poetic than this. And then we're going to write the haiku. So haiku is a Japanese form of poetry, and it's 575 syllables. There are syllable checkers that you could definitely use. So we'll do we code in Python. We code in Python. They call us Pythonistas. Okay. You print. So here's, I think it should be right. Here's a little haiku. So what we did, we created a new file. I just saved it. So as soon as I save it, then it shows up in GitHub Desktop as one changed file. So we have this right here. It's exactly what I just wrote. We would also see it in the haikus here. I know there's a ton of haikus, and I should probably restructure it. But here, so it's this October 27th haiku.md file. I think everything is looking good. So we will commit this to the branch. So right now it's not on the branch, but as soon as we commit, now it's on this branch. So there's no more changes that we see on the left-hand side, but this branch is just local to my own personal machine. It's not available to anybody else. If we want code to be useful to other people, we need to put it somewhere where they can find it. So we'll publish this branch now. So now everything is here, and you could actually create your pull request right here. I like to go back to the repository to make sure that everything looks okay. So we see this like yellow kind of banner that says this branch had recent pushes less than a minute ago. So then we would do compare on pull request. And then we would open a pull request. So a pull request just means that I'm requesting that the project pulls in the code that I just created. And here we would, it says create October 27th haiku. So a new haiku for the repository. I know for this repository, this is kind of like an educational demo repository. But if you're contributing to an open source project, especially if you don't know the maintainers, it's always a good idea to write something out, like exactly like, what is this trying to do? How is this helping? Like, is this resolving any issues? And they may have a template that could help you, and you could explain like how they should test your code and all of that. Like the more detail you could give, the better. And then we would create the pull request, and then me as the maintainer on the other side of this, I see all these pull requests that are here right now. And then what I would do is take a look at it, make sure everything looks okay. And then I can go ahead and merge in the pull request. So if you haven't signed up for Hacktoberfest already, what you could do is go to hacktoberfest.digitalocean.com or hacktoberfest.com also works. And then you would just do start hacking. And then this pull request will, as long as everything looks good and it's not, a spam pull request that gets marked as invalid, it will count as one of your pull requests, and you can earn a free t-shirt or earn a tree planted. Let me see. I saw there's some activity in the chat. Cool. Okay. So I have a few other resources I could share with you all, and and then we could have time to talk afterwards. Yeah, so here are the issues that I mentioned before. I know that the haiku is a way to kind of practice the pull request if you want to do something like Python related, but you're maybe not ready to contribute code directly to a project. Here's like a space where you could educate others in the developer community. The other thing that I think is important to note is that open source is not just for developers. Open source needs everybody to help. So if whether or not you want to code, there's lots of other things that you could do too. There's opportunities for event planning for other organization, for design, like graphic design, illustration, and also writing, like documentation is very important. And there's tons of open source repositories that could use more documentation. So here's just some resources for that. So the left-hand side comes from opensource.guide, and open source design is a community for designers who are involved in open source. There's also a lot of other repositories that are good for beginners if you're just starting out and want to try some things. So there's a few places that will bring together different programming languages. So if you're interested in Python, some of these will have tags for Python to contribute there, or for JavaScript, TypeScript, Go. Yeah, so here's Hacktoberfest, and I think that's it. So I'm happy to answer questions or go through anything again, any way I could help.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for walking us through this. This was very exciting. And I hope that everyone is planning to jump in and participate in Hacktoberfest. You still have a few more days to jump in. And again, as the title goes, that we have all year to participate. So we're going to stick around for a few more minutes and answer any questions that anyone has. If no one has any questions, we will close out.
Yeah, I'll grab all those links for you. I think I have to get back to my actual drive.
So Lisa, while you're pulling that up, we have another question in the chat, and someone says they're a beginner. How can they help?
Yeah, so I think there's lots of ways for everybody to help. I think it kind of depends on what your interests are. Like it's not just code. If there are projects that you are actively using, it's a good idea to get yourself familiar with those repositories. I read a really great piece today by Erica Heidi, which actually used so SourceGraph is a way to search your code, and they have a cloud version that can search through open source repositories. And this is a really helpful way to see like who needs contributors and what their contributions they may be looking for, and if they're looking for documentation or design assets and things like that too. And I'll also give you links for ways that you could do your pull request, even if the video is not available soon. Let me just grab all these links. So here's the Cloud Haiku link. Hacktoberfest.com is where you could sign up for Hacktoberfest. And here is the learn SourceGraph learn issues, where I have the Python troubleshooting guide issues, and there's a template, so people have been able to do them pretty quickly if that's interesting to you. This is the open source guide, how to contribute. Opensourcedesign.net is for those who might be design oriented. There is the firsttimersonly.com, and there's upforgrabs.net. And Awesome for Beginners is a GitHub repository that links out to beginners. And then there's Awesome for non-programmers, so people who may want to do things that are not code contributions, which are also important. And let me find how to open a pull request tutorial. So this one is the tutorial for using the command line, which is not what I went over today. But if you're interested in Linux, this would be how you could do it on the command line. And there is one that is for how to do like basically what we just went through, which was Lynn Muldrow. So this whole series that she did is actually really useful because it also has some other resources to contribute to. So that's the video that's very similar to what we went through today. And this whole series is useful where it tells you like how to find and contribute to open source projects. It goes how to open your first pull request, and it also has a workshop kit if you want to teach other people how to open pull requests. And then
we did have another question come into the chat. It's a great question. If similar pull requests are pushed for one specific feature, how does it get determined which request gets merged?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the way that I have tried to do it as a maintainer is if somebody claims an issue, I try to assign it to them so that other people know that it's taken, but sometimes those people don't deliver, and then we'll go back and forth in the comments and I could reassign them. I think sometimes there might be ways to collaborate on the same pull request. If you see a pull request where you think you can improve it, then you could collaborate. I'm not sure that would count for Hacktoberfest, but it definitely counts for an open source contribution. Like it's definitely, if you have like a more elegant or more optimized solution, then I think it's certainly valid to speak up, with like respectfully. I think within Hacktoberfest itself, I think if there's more than one contribution that are similar, then the maintainer may merge in one, but also like accept the other as like a Hacktoberfest accepted label. Is there a better way for me to share all the links? Because I could also maybe make a Google Doc really fast with all of them.
Yeah, if you would like to make a Google Doc, I can also share that in Slack with everyone after the session.
Okay.
So everyone can have access to these great resources.
I'm going to put them in as links, but I will clean them up too, like in a bit.
So we do have another question. How would you add an open source project on your resume? Sorry, how would you add an open source project on your resume? Do you need permission from the group?
I don't think that I would say probably not. I think it's always a good idea to be in communication with folks you're collaborating with, so it wouldn't be a surprise to them. What I like to do is have like a section of my resume that's related to software projects, and I have that separate from my other experience. It depends on what your work is if you're actively contributing to open source, then the way, like as part of your day job, for example, then you may have that listed underneath your experience. But if you're doing open source alongside other work, then I usually would pull that out and give a little description of what it is that I'm contributing to. Like, so is it, what is the project about? What are my contributions? Like, did I make the documentation for that project? Did I implement a number of features for that project? I think that would be one approach to that. Does that help? I think open source is a really good way to develop professionally too, like especially if you're just getting into tech, contributing to open source can get you very familiar with Git and version control and working as a group. And it's also such a, like, open source, I think it's really important, and it's really important to have more voices in open source so that we could build software that serves everybody. So I definitely encourage getting involved.
Wonderful. We do have a few more minutes for any other questions. Please let us know in the Q&A or the chat.
Okay, the links are all in the doc now, but I will clean them up. And I'll tweet it out too.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions. So Lisa, is there anything else that you would like to add before we close out?
No, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk with you all, and please contribute haikus or tutorials. I love to review them and help you get involved in open source.